In the heart of the city, where towering skyscrapers loomed over crumbling neighborhoods, a humble maid named Daniela Reyes was returning home after a long, exhausting day of labor. Along the way, she noticed an elderly couple dressed in torn clothes, their pale faces and weary eyes heavy with hunger and loneliness. Daniela's heart ached. These two had no warm home to return to, no family to care for them. Without a moment's hesitation, she offered them the only meal she had saved after hours of scrubbing floors. She could never have imagined that this small act of kindness would transform her life forever. Subscribe now and be part of our journey of powerful stories and life-changing moments. Daniela lived in a cramped one-room apartment with cracked walls and a flickering light bulb. Every morning before dawn, she would walk miles to the wealthy district where she worked as a maid, cleaning marble floors that never seemed dirty and polishing crystal glasses she could never afford to drink from. Her younger brother, Luis, waited at home, dreaming of studying but knowing his sisters. Hard work was the only thing keeping them alive. The old couple she had helped, Thomas and Evelyn Harper, were once respected teachers, but fate had been unkind. They had lost their savings, their home, and most of their health. To Daniela, giving them her food was only natural. To the Harpers, it was a blessing they would never forget. The very next morning, tragedy struck. Daniela was dismissed from her job without warning. Her employer accused her of neglect and threatened not to pay her last month's wages. With her meager savings gone and Luis waiting at home, Daniela felt the weight of despair crushing her. As she sat outside her building that evening, clutching her empty purse, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. From it stepped a tall man in an immaculate suit, his presence commanding silence in the street. Beside him stood Thomas and Evelyn, the very couple Daniela had helped the night before. Daniela sat on the cold concrete steps of her apartment building, her head buried in her hands. The rain had stopped, but the street still glistened with puddles that reflected the harsh neon lights above. She clutched her worn leather purse, now empty, as if it could somehow shield her from the growing storm inside her heart. Her body was tired, but her soul was even more exhausted. She had no food left, no job, and no answers for Luis when he asked her what they would eat tomorrow.
Then suddenly the steady hum of the night was interrupted. A deep, resonant sound rolled across the narrow street, the purring engine of a luxury car, smooth and commanding. Daniela looked up slowly, her breath caught in her throat. A sleek black sedan, polished like obsidian, was pulling up right in front of her crumbling building. Its tinted windows reflected her weary face back at her. Neighbors peeked out from their windows. A child pressed his face against the rusty railing of a balcony, whispering to his mother, who could it be? Even stray dogs backed away, their eyes following the car as it came to a stop. The door opened with a low, deliberate click. Out stepped a man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that seemed untouched by the dust of the city. His shoes gleamed under the flickering streetlight. His very presence silenced the street, as though even the night itself was holding its breath. Daniela's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had never seen such a man in this part of town. But before she could think, her eyes fell on the figures emerging behind him, two familiar faces. The elderly couple, Thomas and Evelyn Harper, the same couple she had fed just last night. Their eyes, tired but warm, met hers. Evelyn gave a small, trembling smile. Daniela's confusion deepened. Why were they here? How had they come with this stranger? The man walked closer. His steps were unhurried, yet each one echoed like thunder in Daniela's ears. He stopped in front of her and extended a hand, not in arrogance, but in quiet respect. "Miss Reyes?" His voice was low, steady, carrying both authority and gentleness. Daniela hesitated, then nodded weakly. The man's gaze softened. "My name is Alexander Hale," he said. "Perhaps you do not know me, but I know something about you." Daniela blinked, stunned. How could a man like this know her name, her face, her life? It was Thomas who stepped forward now. His frail hands trembled as he reached for Daniela's arm. "This is the young woman," he said to Alexander, his voice thick with emotion. "This is the one who gave us her meal. She had nothing, yet she gave everything." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "She saved us from despair," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniela's lips parted, but no words came out. Her mind spun in disbelief. She wanted to protest, to say it was nothing, that it was just a sandwich. But her throat tightened and her heart hammered like a drum. Alexander inhaled deeply, as though steadying himself. "Do you know who they are?" he asked Daniela, nodding toward the couple. She shook her head. "They are not just any old couple. They are teachers. My teachers. The only people who believed in me when the world turned its back. Decades ago, I was just a poor boy with empty pockets and no future. But they gave me hope. They gave me knowledge. And because of them, I stand where I do today." The revelation struck Daniela like a bolt of lightning. She glanced at Thomas and Evelyn, their eyes brimming with quiet dignity. She could see it now, the strength behind their frailty, the history etched into their weary faces. Alexander's voice grew heavier but warmer. "When they told me about you, about the maid who sacrificed her only meal for them, I could not remain still. I had to see you. I had to meet the person who with so little gave so much." Daniela's breath came in shallow bursts. Her mind screamed that this was impossible. Why would the richest man in the city be standing at her broken doorstep? Why would he care about her? But then Alexander bent slightly, lowering himself to her eye level, as if to erase the vast distance between their worlds. His eyes glistened under the dim light. "Kindness like yours," he said slowly, deliberately, "is worth more than all the wealth I have. And it deserves to be repaid, not once, not twice, but 1,000 times over." The words seemed to hang in the air, echoing in the silence of the narrow street. Daniela felt her chest tighten, her hands trembling violently. The neighbors whispered, but she couldn't hear them. All she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat and the quiet promise in Alexander Hale's voice. Daniela stood frozen on the steps, her lips trembling, her eyes wide with disbelief. For years she had been invisible, just a maid, just another shadow moving silently through the city. And yet in this moment, under the broken streetlight, the richest man she had ever seen was speaking to her with reverence. Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head, whispering, "It was only a meal, nothing more." But Alexander smiled softly, a smile that carried both gratitude and promise. "No, Miss Reyes," he said firmly. "It was everything." He turned to his driver, who handed him an envelope. Inside was an offer Daniela could barely comprehend. Employment in his company, a salary that could lift her out of poverty, and a scholarship for her brother Luis. Her knees weakened. She clutched the paper, afraid it would vanish if she blinked. Thomas and Evelyn reached for her hands. "You gave us hope," Evelyn said, "and now hope returns to you." Neighbors gathered around, their eyes shining with wonder. For the first time, Daniela felt truly seen, not as a servant, not as a burden, but as a woman whose small act of kindness had set destiny in motion. Luis came running down the stairs, barefoot, his face lit with curiosity. When Daniela showed him the papers, his jaw dropped. He wrapped his arms around her waist, crying into her uniform. "We're free, Hermana. We're finally free." Luis came running down the stairs, barefoot, his face lit with curiosity. When Daniela showed him the papers, his jaw dropped. He wrapped his arms around her waist, crying into her uniform. "We're free, Hermana. We're finally free." Daniela's tears spilled freely now. The rain-soaked streets blurred into glistening rivers of light. She looked at Alexander, her voice breaking. "Why me? I'm no one." Alexander shook his head. "You are someone who proved that even the poorest heart can be richer than gold." And in that moment, Daniela understood the truth. Her sacrifice had not been a loss, but the seed of a miracle. From that day forward, she carried a flame of hope not just for herself, but for everyone who doubted the power of compassion. Because sometimes the smallest kindness creates the greatest destiny.